Prologue. At the dawn of an era marked by tyranny and suffering, Rome was the center of a vast but fragile empire. Power was concentrated in the hands of a few elites, while millions of souls marched in chains, subjugated by a system that glorified cruelty. The Colosseum, the symbol of grandeur Roman times, it had become the altar where freedom was sacrificed in the name of spectacle. But in the very heart of this corrupt empire, a spark of revolt was ignited. It began with 6 gladiators, forced to fight for the entertainment of the crowds, each with a story carved in pain and loss. Valeria, the fearless warrior from Gaul and Varus, the leader born of dust and blood, were the soul of this group. Along with them, Syrus, the strategist, Leontius, the brute force, Nisria, the stone woman from Egypt, and Claudia, the 𝕲𝖒𝖕𝖎𝖏 warrior of the Roman Empire. They swore to defy the fate that had condemned them. Behind the scenes of Roman greatness, women like Aurelia Claudia, Livia Pompeia, and Cornelia Octavia, wives of senators, saw the truth about the empire they supported and chose to join the shadow fight. Through cunning and sacrifice, they helped ignite a revolt that would shake the foundations of Rome. The Colosseum, once a place of loss, became the scene where freedom was born. The escape of the gladiators was the signal that rang throughout the Roman Empire, calling the slaves, peasants, and even soldiers to a common cause. Rome, the center of the known world, was to become the symbol of a new order, one based on justice, equality, and freedom. But to build this new world, the 6 gladiators had to face not only the legions Romans, but also the demons of their own past. Betrayals, sacrifices, and difficult choices would shape them, turning them from slaves into legends. The prologue of their story is one of courage, sacrifice, and hope. Under the bloody sky of Rome, these heroes dared to face the world's greatest empire. And though the beginning was written in blood, the end would be etched in glory. Thus begins their story, of those who turned pain into power and slavery into freedom, a story of rebellion, love, and a ceaseless struggle for a better world. Chapter 3. Bonds and Personal Slaves. In his tent, Marcus Fabius Valens lay, meditating on the coming days and the strategies to be applied. He was aware that danger was near, and rumors of an alliance of Germanic tribes only increased the tension among the soldiers. Suddenly, Valens he heard a noise from outside the tent. Quintus and Marcellus, who had been guarding the entrance, were changing shifts, replaced by 2 fresh legionnaires who had just arrived, Lucan and Drusus. They were younger, but just as devoted. Lucan, with a fine scar on his left cheek, was known for his intelligence and agility in battle. Drusus, though young, had an imposing stature and rare composure. The 2 had saluted respectfully, and Valens returned the salute with a short gesture, a sign that their vigil was appreciated. Inside, Livia had awoken from her sleep, and seeing that Valens was still awake, she quietly approached and brought him a cup of water. The woman had noticed the commander's growing concern in recent days, but she did not dare to ask him about it. Helena, who was sleeping peacefully, was more resigned to the uncertain future that awaited them all as slaves. They knew their destinies depended on those who commanded them, but they felt a special respect for Valens, who he treated him with a certain gentleness, rarely seen in a Roman soldier. Valens thanked briefly for the water and, sipping slowly, allowed himself to be immersed in a profound silence. His thoughts flew to Rome, to the eternal city he had sworn to defend, to his friends and comrades lost throughout the campaigns, but also to those in his life whom he had not seen for years. He knew that, in one way or another, his destiny was linked to that of the Legion, and that personal peace, it was a luxury he allowed himself only in his brief moments of solitude, before sunrise. A familiar sound began to resound in the camp, the wake-up trumpet, the echo of which spread like a wave of energy among the soldiers. The legionnaires stood up, they gathered their makeshift beds and quickly grabbed their armor and weapons. The camp came to life and the disciplined routine was set in motion without hesitation. Helena and Livia had also woken up and started preparing breakfast for Valens. Hard bread, cheese and some dried fruit, along with a small jug of water. The legionnaires lined up in front of the tents, ready to receive their daily instructions. Valens came out of the tent, accompanied by Lucius and Gaius, to inspect the preparations. Looking around, he felt proud to see the discipline and preparation each legionary, but also the heavy responsibility on his shoulders, knowing that each one's life depended on his decisions. Later, on his orders, all the centurions and important officers of the legion had been called to a conference in the command tent. Valens discusses in detail the position about the strategic position of the camp and about the possible movements of the Germanic tribes, of which they were already informed through the scouts. There was the risk of a night attack, and everyone had to be prepared. After the meeting in his tent, Valens prepared for a new day of planning and training. Helena and Livia resumed their daily tasks, preparing equipment and spare weapons, tending the tent, and setting everything in order for the commander's return that evening. Lucan and Drusus continued to stand guard, quietly discussing among themselves the rumors of the camp and the possibility of imminent conflict. That evening, before retreating, Valens walked through the camp, passing the rows of tents and observing the soldiers sitting by the fire, telling stories and joking to dispel their fear. They were all young, most of them without family, but proud to serve Rome. Valens stopped by one of the fires, exchanging a few words with the legionnaires, showing them that he understood their fear, but also their hope. That night, Valens retired to his tent, where Helena and Livia. They were waiting for him, ready to help him with his armor and prepare a hot tea. Tea was a quiet evening, but Valens knew that the quiet was only temporary. The woods at the edge of the camp looked increasingly menacing, and the thought of an imminent attack kept him awake. The days ahead would be a test of the legion's loyalty, discipline, and training. The 𝕲𝖕𝖆𝖆𝖕𝖎, and Valens was ready to face any danger with his men. Next to him, Helena and Livia continued to serve him in silence, loyal in their own way, not knowing that their future was linked to that of the legion, to the decisions and by the bravery of the commander. On the morning of departure, Marcus Fabius Valens awoke early, and a solemn silence reigned in his tent. After a few moments of preparation, he put on his armor and collected the last provisions for the 2-week raid. Lucius and Gaius, his centurions trusted, along with part of the legion, would follow him on this dangerous expedition of 50 kilometers, intended to conquer an important city and several nearby villages, occupied by hostile tribes. Leaving his tent in the care of Helena and Livia, Valens waved them goodbye and left at dawn. The soldiers lined up behind him. As the camp grew quiet in the absence of the legate and most of the soldiers, Helena and Livia got down to business, along with the other 16 slaves of the legion. The camp needed organization in the absence of a significant part of its fighting force, and this fell to the responsibility of the women. Livia, who had a more authoritarian nature, took care of the kitchen and organizing dinner for those who remained, while Helena took over the role of looking after the uniforms and clothing of the most important legations. In the kitchen, Livia was coordinating the activities in a clear and firm voice. Helena came over and started helping to prepare the meal as the talk about the legations they were serving turned into a revelation about their feelings and thoughts. Crispina, smiling shyly. Gaius Marcellus is sometimes too serious, but I feel that he has a good heart. He takes care of the soldiers, and in the evening before every battle he tells me not to worry. He makes me feel protected. Elia, nodding. Lucius Cassius is a hard man, but also just. When he looks at me with that cold look of his, I feel small. And yet, he never raised his voice. Flavia, I'm lucky with Decimus Varus. He's gentle and treats me well, especially since I've been here since I was only 15. He taught me to read and write and count. He says that every slave should know something more than just work. Helena, in a calm voice, Valens, Marcus Fabius Valens is right, but he has something in his eyes. I think he is burdened by the responsibility he carries. I am not afraid of him, and, in a way, I care what will happen to him. Livia, smiling slightly, you know well, Helena, that Valens has a noble soul. Even on the battlefield, he is a leader who leaves no man behind. We, those in his tent, are lucky. As they talked, the other women shared similar thoughts, from respect to fear, but they all seemed to recognize the same reality. The commanders they served, although masters, had a special humanity, a warmth that only they saw in their moments' privacy of the camp. Once the dinner was ready, the slaves prepared the portions of the soldiers who had returned to the camp, tired from the day's work. Helena and Livia, together with the other women, finished the last part of the service, eagerly waiting to hear news of his incursion Valens and about the return of the legion. 𝕰𝖒𝖕𝖆𝖆𝖐, the slave of Lucius Cassius, was a 26-year-old young woman with fine features and a natural beauty that attracted the eyes of those around her. Raised in a small village in northern Italy, 𝕰𝖒𝖕𝖆 had been captured during a rebellion and sold into slavery. She had long, light chestnut hair, and her large green eyes reflected a combination of resignation and intelligence. In the legion camp, she had quickly earned her place among the other slaves by her gentle nature and agility with who carried out his duties despite the hardships of life. Lucius Cassius, the legate he served, was an imposing man, known for his iron discipline and authoritative calm. 𝕰𝖒𝖕𝖆 had quickly learned that although he seemed aloof and cold, Lucius was very attentive for those who were loyal to him and a keen sense of justice. Whenever she was in his presence, 𝕰𝖒𝖕𝖆 felt a strange uneasiness, not from fear, but rather from a deep respect and a silent admiration, hard to explain. His gaze's seriousness seemed to run deep into his soul, and 𝕰𝖒𝖕𝖆 always wanted to live up to his expectations. 𝕰𝖒𝖕𝖆's day started early, with chores that included cleaning and tending to Cassius' armor and equipment. Lucius was meticulous, and 𝕰𝖒𝖕𝖆 had quickly learned how to prepare his armor so that it shines impeccably. He did not allow himself mistakes. She knew that Lucius's respect for her depended on how she performed her duties. She focused her attention on every detail, from cleaning her armor and preparing her weapons to setting up her tent, making sure everything was perfect. In the rare moments that he was paying attention to her, his voice serious but calm. 𝕰𝖒𝖕𝖆 had noticed that although he rarely expressed affection, in his own quiet way Lucius respected her and even seemed to trust her. Sometimes he would ask her how she was feeling or if there was anything she misses him, and 𝕰𝖒𝖕𝖆 always responded with respect and gratitude. These conversations were short, but they meant a lot to her, giving her a sense of security in the midst of the brutal world she lived. In the evening, after she finished all her tasks, she retreated with the other slave girls, but often her thoughts turned to Lucius. She admired his patience and the way he led his men, as well as his determination in battle. Chapter 4. Prisons of the Roman Empire. In the Roman Empire, prisons were used more as places of temporary detention for prisoners awaiting trial, punishment, or for prisoners of war captured during the empire's expansion. These prisons, known as carceri, were often simple dark and unsanitary rooms, where the living conditions were extremely harsh. Prisoners were usually bound, kept in humid and unsanitary conditions, and food was minimal, offered only to keep them alive until their fate was decided. The prisoners brought to the Roman Empire came from many conquered territories, such as Gaul, Dacia, Britain, Greece, and Egypt, but also from the regions of the Middle East. Some of them were considered too dangerous to be integrated into the Roman social structure and were imprisoned or sentenced to death. Others, especially those with special physical features or abilities, were turned into slaves and sold in the Roman markets to serve different social classes or institutions of the empire. Separate category of prisoners was formed from gladiators, people used for public entertainment through arena fights. Roman prisons usually had several rooms or cells in which prisoners were distributed according to provenance, age or physical resistance point. One of the most feared and harsh prisons in Rome was 𝕲𝖕𝖒𝖒𝖆𝖵𝖎𝖚, located under the Capitol, near the Roman Forum. 𝕲𝖕𝖒𝖒𝖒𝖵 was a dark, cold and damp place, used especially for leaders of rebellions and for prisoners considered dangerous, captives awaiting their execution. Prisoners of war, captured from various battles, were an important element in the structure of Roman society, being used in various ways, as cheap labor or as a spectacle in amphitheaters. Due to their origin from varied territories, the prisoners brought to the Roman Empire had a cultural and linguistic diversity, bringing together people from Celts and Gauls to Dacians and Egyptians. This diversity was not only a source of work and entertainment for the Romans, but also a means by which they consolidated their power, showing their supremacy by dominating entire peoples. Those considered useful were often turned into slaves and distributed in the households of Roman nobles, in mines or in the construction of roads, aqueducts and other public structures. Other prisoners were forced to work in quarries or fight in the arena as gladiators, for the entertainment of the population. In the case of prisoners sentenced to hard labor, they were often sent to the gold or silver mines, such as those in Hispania or Dacia, where the working conditions, the work was unbearable and the survival rate was extremely low. The less fortunate prisoners were sent to the gladiatorial arenas or subjected to public punishment. Gladiators, very popular in Rome, were a form of public entertainment through which the Romans satisfied their need to see the greatness and dominance of the empire. In these shows, the prisoners fought to the death either with each other or with ferocious animals. Among the most famous slaves, from various corners of the empire, there were several prisoners who gained fame through their physical strength and determination to survive despite the hardships. Valeria, a captive woman originally from Gaul, Valeria was a warrior captured during Caesar's campaigns. Known for her courage and strength, Valeria was initially destined to work in the stone quarries near Rome, but was quickly noticed by a gladiator owner, who turned her into a gladiator. Although women were rarely used in the arena, Valeria became a sensation among spectators due to her skills, and her story was used to fuel the legend of the Romans about the subjugation of the Gauls. Tullia, originally from Dacia, Tullia was a prisoner taken during the campaigns against the Dacians. She became known for her physical endurance and intelligence with which she adapted to any environment. Because of her talent for working with animals, she was assigned to work in the stables of an important Roman family, where she was responsible for the horses used in public races. Her physical strength and skill with animals made her respected among the other slaves. Nisria, an Egyptian woman, Nisria was captured in Egypt and brought to Rome. She had exotic beauty, but also remarkable physical endurance, which led to her assignment to hard labor in construction. Nisria worked to erect public edifices in Rome and was noted for her extraordinary endurance, often being nicknamed the Stone Woman by her fellow slaves and overseers. Chapter 5. Gladiators. On the day of the great fight, the sun burns relentlessly over the arena in Rome, surrounded by thousands of cheering and bloodthirsty spectators. Arrius, Leontius, Varus, and the other gladiators stand in the shadow of the great stone gates, waiting for the clear sound of trumpets announcing the beginning of the show. They know there is no turning back. The arena is where they will prove themselves or where they will find their end. Trumpets sound echo, and the massive gates open, letting in blinding light, and the tumultuous noise of the crowd. Arrius, Leontius, and Varus step forward with sure steps, but their eyes are full of determination and fury. To the magistrate's signal, the gladiators raise their weapons and advance. In the center of the arena, met by their opponents, slaves trained to kill, all hailing from different corners of the empire. The first battle begins with a deafening roar from the crowd. Arrius lunges at the first opponent, a Germanic giant with a heavy spear, who tries to knock him down. With a powerful blow, Arius manages to dodge in time, raising his shield and swinging his sword to strike, with precise and deadly movements. With a side kick, he manages to throw the Germanic off balance and topple his spear. Without hesitation, Arius strikes with all his might and plunges his sword deep into his opponent's chest, breathing heavily but triumphantly. Meanwhile, Leontius faces two opponents at once, a Thracian and a Numidian. Leontius keeps his cool and uses his long spear to keep at bay. Attacks, spinning quickly to parry the blows. The Thracian rushes at him, and Leontius jabs at him, managing to block his advance and knock him down. The Numidius raises his sword to strike him from behind, but Leontius, alert and focused, suddenly turns and thrusts the spear into his opponent with unparalleled precision, winning the applause of the frenzied spectators. At the end of the arena, Varus he is in a brutal fight with a gladiator from Gallia, a massive and terrifyingly strong man. Varus, equipped with light armor and a shield, tries to catch the Gaul, who strikes hard, determined to take him down. Varus' shield cracked under the powerful blows, but 𝕲𝖃𝖆 continued to hold on, blocking and countering with precise strikes. In a moment of weakness on his opponent's part, Varus raised his shield for the last time, and with his sword, he manages to slash to the side, felling the Gaul in one swift movement. The fighting continues for hours, as each gladiator faces new challenges and new opponents. One by one, Arius, Leontius and Varus make their way through the crowd of enemies, using every skill acquired, every strategy learned under the harsh training of their instructors. Their movements are precise and graceful, and each shot seems calculated to maximize their chances of survival, but also to impress those in the stands. By the end of the day, all three remain standing. The arena is now filled with whoops and cheers. The crowd cheers them with wild admiration, and their faces are covered in dust and blood. Despite their fatigue, they hold their heads high, knowing that they have won the freedom to live for one more day. Looking at each other, they realize that, in that arena, they have become not only survivors, but also a force to be feared. Varus, hailing from Dacia, was a solid man with a robust constitution and exceptional physical endurance, which allowed him to survive in the particularly harsh conditions of work in the gold mines. He was captured by the Romans during the conquest of Dacia, when the fierce resistance of the Dacian tribes was not enough to prevent the expansion. Like many other prisoners, Varus was sent deep into the earth to mine the precious gold that fueled the ambitions of the Roman Empire. The transition from the freedom of the 𝕲𝖃𝖆𝖆 hills to the suffocating darkness of the mines was a brutal transformation for him, but also for his free spirit, which refused to give in to suffering. Varus stood out not only for his physical strength, but also for his courage. Steadfastness with which he faced every day of work. In an atmosphere full of fear and despair, he represented to others a ray of hope and a model of resistance. The exhausting and dangerous conditions of the mine, where collapses and the lack of fresh air were a constant, wore down many of the slaves, but Varus managed to carry on day after day. Chapter 6. Gladiator Women. The gladiator prison was a gloomy and cold place, located underground, with thick stone walls that always kept a smell of dampness and metal. This prison was separated from the prison of the male gladiators by a narrow corridor, 5 meters long, which was constantly guarded by 2 imposing Roman centurions. They were well armed and ready to intervene at any moment, for the gladiators, although women, were extremely dangerous and well trained in combat. The narrow dark corridor was a barrier between the two similar yet distinct worlds, for the female gladiators had their own community and unwritten rules, although the conditions of detention were equally harsh for all. Inside the gladiator prison, the cells were organized in long rows, each cell being equipped with a small window through which very little could enter natural light. The narrow windows were located close to the ceiling, with thick iron bars, and the light that came in always seemed pale and cold. On the rough floor, the gladiator women slept on straw or thin mats, without comfort, and food was limited and often insufficient. The atmosphere was tense, but also full of a silent solidarity, because all the women knew that only together they could face the brutality and trials to which they were subjected. Among these gladiators, Valeria, Claudia and Nisria were the strongest and united by a friendship born from hard trials and common struggles. Valeria, a robust and tall woman, came from Gaul, and her unyielding nature was known and respected by all her colleagues. Claudia, shorter but agile and cunning, was originally from Dacia and had extraordinary speed in battle, being often difficult to catch and hold in check. Nisria, of African descent, had extraordinary strength and unusual patience, being the quietest of the three, but also the most lethal in the arena. Together, they formed a feared trio and were a model of courage and strength of character for the rest of the gladiators. The women gladiators were 37 in number, brought from different territories conquered by the Roman Empire, some from Gallia, others from Dacia, Germany or North Africa. Each of them carried in their hearts the desire to return to their native land, but until then, they had accepted their fate and were preparing for the bloody battles in the arena. Daily training took place in an adjacent space, strictly supervised, and between them reigned a silent discipline, strengthened by harsh circumstances. On the cold walls of the prison, some gladiators had carved symbols from their cultures or the names of loved ones they had lost, as a form of resistance and remembrance. In this harsh and desolate place, solidarity and bonds of friendship were the only rays of hope, and Valeria, Claudia and Nisria tried, day by day, to stay strong to face their cruel destiny. Valeria was a woman with impressive strength, both physical and mental, who captivated the public's attention Roman and became a sensation in the gladiatorial arenas. Originally from Gaul, Valeria had been a warrior in her tribe, fighting fiercely against Roman expansion. During the campaigns of conquest led by Caesar, she was captured and, like many prisoners of war, was initially sent to work in the stone quarries near Rome. Known for her courage and endurance, Valeria quickly distinguished herself among the other captives with a dignified and fearless attitude. She was not afraid to face danger and, even in the harsh working conditions, kept an expression of defiance in front of the Roman authorities. This attitude attracted the attention of a lanista, a gladiator owner, who was always looking for new talents to offer the public a unique show. In Valeria he saw not only a potential gladiator, but also an opportunity to attract the crowds with an exotic and unusual character for the Roman arena. A woman warrior from Gaul, ready to face the challenges and dangers of a gladiator fight and the training arena. Valeria quickly adapted to her new life. Although she lacked the technical training of gladiators, she had been trained to fight and survive from a young age, and this was an advantage. She quickly learned to use Roman weapons and developed her own technique, adapted to her fighting style and strength. What set her apart from other gladiators, however, was not only strength, but also an intensity in battle that seemed to recall her warrior origins. She had become a sensation among spectators, and her story as a captured warrior was used to reinforce the image of the Romans as fearless conquerors who managed to subdue even the proudest of Gauls. In the arena, Valeria fought with a determination that combined courage with an intense inner rage.